Well, welcome everybody to today's session of Kingdom Life. It is Tuesday, August 31st. My name is John Ramos. I'm the lead pastor of Kingdom Culture Ministries, located here in beautiful BC, Canada. We have a wonderful guest here today, Dr. Ken Keese. We've been talking about kingdom life, and the subject that we talked about on the last show was a different type of personalities and knowing how to fit into what you're actually called to do. So welcome, Ken, and lead us off into today's discussion.
Well, thanks again, John, for allowing me to be on your show and sharing. And welcome, audience, to listeners and viewers. So today we want to talk about my book, The Quest for Purpose, but really the whole concept of what is purpose and why is it so important. And as believers, that really we are accountable to bring our best to the life that we have here. Otherwise, it's quite frankly wasted.
Yeah, I talked a little bit about in Genesis, this is a book of so many firsts. And one of the key firsts that we need to understand is when God called Adam and gave him work, he didn't give him a job. Let's not choose what we're going to do based upon our human rationality. It pays well, it's prestigious, it'll open doors, whatever. We should be seeking God and asking God, what have you called me to? What is my purpose? Because there's a big difference between job and work, and even between who you're going to marry. When I was speaking to my wife who's living overseas, and God spoke to me 3 times, said, this is going to be your wife. Why did you choose her? Why? Because who God's going to choose to partner you with is going to have to do with your purpose. It's so important to have the right partner. So go ahead, Ken, and lead us off in that discussion today.
Well, when we think about purpose, the stats are sad, right? That less than 10% of the population are living on purpose. They know that they're doing what they're called to do. And as Christians, that's not acceptable. That's not okay. And one of the reasons that we believe anyways in our work after being in this field for over 30 years is that people aren't willing to do the work.
Wow.
In other words, I remember having lunch in California with Dr. Dick Bowles and Richard Nodell. So the two of them are career development specialists. Dick's now passed away, Dick Bowles. He wrote the book, What Color is Your Parachute? And they had over 80 years in the career development field. And they said, well, why, with all the assessments and tools and programs, why do we still have so many people who dislike what they do? Or they're not living on purpose? And he said, in unison, they said, because people have not been willing to do the work. When we say work, we're talking about prayer, but life leaves clues. Even biblically, discovery is reserved for the person who is seeking. You discovered our faith or the Holy Spirit or insight or wisdom. You get that because you're looking for it, not because you're just hanging around on the couch waiting for it. You're not going to find a life partner just living on your couch. Now, maybe if you go online, that's possible. Mm-hmm. But if you're just sitting there, you're not going to drop out of the sky. So the reason I wrote the book, my purpose in life, John, is to help others to live, lead, and work on purpose. So the saddest state is for us to just kind of be hanging out, not embracing. Now, I believe that our purposes are sort of preset before. He says in Jeremiah, I knew you before you were born. I have these assignments for you. And so I believe that my purpose of encouraging and helping others is going to be for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. The context and where it's grown for me. I grew up on a dairy farm, so I'm not doing that right now. But I even knew when I was 16 years of age, I was asked to be MC of weddings, of banquets, of all kinds of events, through my teen years into my early 20s. So I always knew that I wanted to be a speaker. And so I had my own dairy farm, and I got up one morning in my late 20s with my own dairy farm. And I asked myself this question. I want everybody that's watching or listening to this to ask the same question. If you're doing exactly what you're doing right now, 20 years from now, would that be okay? And I said, absolutely not. And so even though I was the 3rd generation dairy farmer and I knew the industry and I was good at it, it wasn't what my assignment was. It wasn't what my calling was. So I sold the dairy farm and I started into the professional development field. Okay. And then where that has evolved now is that I was ordained a few years ago, and I actually left the church. for my teenage years for a decade. And, this is my testimony around this, is that I just really saw that if I made the decision wrongly and incorrectly on what I saw other Christians were doing. Here are all these other Christians. They were just miserable individuals. They weren't happy. They weren't living on purpose. And they weren't really living the word either, and not necessarily, blaming them or trying to point fingers on them. Just that was the reality. It says, well, this is what Christianity is. I don't want to have anything to do with it. And then in my late 20s, God got a hold of me. He says, Ken, if you look at people, you will always be disappointed. It's about you and me. It's not about you and them. And that was really my journey to start to get into this development. Now, the purpose of this show is to help others to live on purpose. And so I've got this book here, and I just want to take you through step by step, John, some of the things that we teach and some principles for people, regardless of where they're at, to go to the next level. So first of all, the assumptions as believers. Now, my book is for the general audience. So in other words, if you have non-believers, you want to give my book to them, for sure that's there for them. However, my testimony is in the back of the book. That without Jesus in the center of this, you are not going to fulfill your full purpose. However, in the meantime, here are some steps that you can do in addition to and just being clear. So first of all, life leaves clues. And even if I'm doing my purpose, one of the things I started the book out with that many other authors didn't include, is this whole idea of mindset. And God really talks about how our words manifest themselves. In other words, what you say, what you're listening to is really filling your spirit. So you can't listen to, the mainstream media day in and day out with all the negativity and all the things going on and be filled with your spirit. You can't be a pessimist and still be embracing the spirit and the word. Now, there's some people who have a propensity to be more conservative, more pessimistic at birth than others. However, we actually need to embrace the word to have this mindset of optimism. Now, a generic author, Dr. Martin Seligman, wrote the book Learned Optimism, and he proved in his research over 25 years, people who are optimistic are more successful. Well, God's word says that. If I looked to the
I was
future,
afraid you were going to say that.
Yeah, okay. I mean, what has your experience been, John, when you meet people who are negative or meet people who are positive and the impact that they have in their environment around them?
Yeah, like even with myself and my personality, I'm typically funny, upbeat, and optimistic, and I know that draws people. And, somebody who's negative or pessimistic, they're actually not drawing people. They're actually drawing their energy. They're what causes them to be happy.
I mean, the word is clear about that is, what you think about comes about, as a man or woman or person thinketh. So that responsibility is that when we have events happen, let me just briefly cover this for you. It's a chapter in the book, but there's an entire book that Martin, he gave me permission to put his research in my book. And so it was kind of him to do it, is that
excellent.
how we respond to it is a couple of things. First of all, when something negative happens, the optimistic person says they contain that negative event to that event. In other words, they don't say, well, I didn't get the job. However, that the optimistic person, what they'll do is say, well, that's fine, but the rest of my life is fine. The negative person says, I didn't get the job. Well, the rest of my life is not going well either. And so they take negative events and they project it into everything else. And then they also, a person who's pessimistic, projects it into the future.
Right.
So an optimistic person, on the other hand, if I don't get the job, you know what? There are other jobs that are out there. I'll be able to handle it. It's their loss. I would have been a really good person for their team, but obviously that wasn't a fit. And the other one is, as believers, we trust his walking in front of us as well. Right. On the other side, it's interesting in the research is that pessimistic people even discount successes. So I get a job and I said, well, I don't know why they hired me. I can't believe that. I'm shocked that they even hired. So they even discount when the Lord blesses them. They even discount the fact that they do it. So that mindset is number one. So even though if I have my purpose and I'm clear about what I'm supposed to do in life, if I'm pessimistic, I'm going to hinder all the things that he wants to bring to me. Now, the next thing that I have in the book that other authors weren't really willing to talk about, actually, in fact, in the beginning, I should go back because this is being a Christian show. It's a little bit different for me because a lot of times I do talks on this book in sort of the open world in the marketplace. In the first chapter in the book, I said you need to have meaning before purpose. Well, meaning is the spiritual truth. So, if a lot of people, if somebody says to me, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in anything. Well, you can't believe in nothing, because if you believe in nothing, that is something. And so the first chapter in the book is that, and this is where we've already covered this, is that you need to know what your spirituality, what that means to you. Because if you just think that we're an accident, then that's going to affect your choices.
100%.
Your beliefs affect your choices. So that meaning's first, then mindset. Then the next one, which is so biblical in it, is that what's our character? So I might know my purpose, but I'm a person that doesn't act with integrity. Well, so I have 10 character traits within the book, which are foundational. Now, some of them are also linked back, of course, and most of them, in fact, to biblical principles. There's nothing new. Neither of us have created anything new, John. We just have repurposed it and been our calling to say, how can I clarify? So the other thing is I need to choose behavior. Can I be, again, a person of where I have forgiveness? There was, if you actually get it, I believe it's Peter, you can correct me if I'm wrong, where if I have unforgiveness towards my wife, my prayers are not heard. Well, hang on. So why do I want to forgive? Well, even in the natural world, if I have unforgiveness in my heart,
Right.
You've heard this story, many pastors have told it. Unforgiveness is like me drinking poison and expecting you to die. You've heard that story before. But the same thing here. We want to forgive others for them, not for me. Right. I don't share this story very often, but the example is in 1982, my girlfriend was murdered by somebody that I knew.
Wow.
And the police came, and this was before cell phones. They knocked on the door. They hauled me in, and I didn't know why I was in the police station. And one of the reasons that I was a person of interest is that I had a conversation with her just hours before she was died. So anyways, I was in there. I had no idea that this had happened. And they said, we have reason to believe that you're a boyfriend of Carol Ann, and this is what occurred to her. And so I needed to, this individual, by the way, I work with at an agriculture company, and he was hired as a security guard overseeing 4-H kids. So it was just a sexual assault gone bad, and he said and he just beat her to death. I needed to forgive him, regardless of what occurred, what happened, not for him, but for me. Because if I didn't forgive him, then I would let that event affect me for the rest of my life. Yeah. And so when we think about purpose, the fruits of the Spirit need to be in the middle of this purpose. Because if I'm a jerk, yet I'm still doing what I'm called to do. We've seen this, and unfortunately, John, you and I talked about this many times at lunch, is where we see people get into Christian leadership, and then they let the arrogance, they let these things take over. And that's a sad state of affairs where, yes, you're called to lead the ministry, but stop being like that. I mean, you're not revealing the fruits of the Spirit. So we talk about these 10 character traits. Now, after that, said, okay, I've got this foundational pieces to live this life fully with, meaning and with mindset and with character traits. But what about now, what am I supposed to do? So I had to deal with, the heritage of being on the dairy farm. I knew I was supposed to be a speaker, but I needed to kind of step out of that in courage. That's what we talked about in one of the other shows where Jesus says, leave behind. You know what? They're fishermen. Leave your boats behind, leave your brother, leave your sister behind to what I'm calling you to do. So my encouragement is, and this is a whole roadmap in the book. And interesting enough, in 1989, I hired a coach, when this is before coaches were big, to help me to get clear. I knew I was supposed to speak and communicate to others, but I didn't know what the topic was, and I didn't know who my audience was. And so I spent 6 months journaling and being prayerful and following a format that Mike McManus put together, which I've now sort of repurposed in this book. Mike passed away 20 years ago. And I drove 2.5 hours each way to do the coaching every month for 6 months, just so that I could get the help to force me to be disciplined, to pay attention. Life leaves clues. Do you know what those clues are? The Spirit leaves just inklings in your soul about the directions you need to go. And so do you know what those are? Or are you just being comfortable that that's where you're supposed to be? I remember when I was younger, one of the reasons I sort of left the faith, this is the last thing I want you to do. God has called me to Africa to be a missionary. I don't want that. But one of the things that I've learned in maturing and growing it, and you can speak to this in a minute, John, is that when God has called you to a certain direction, he's going to bless you, and it's going to be the ride of your life. It's going to be more exciting, more positive, more energizing than you ever could on your own plan.
Mm-hmm. And I even liked what you talked about earlier, where you said that God spoke to you and said that if you always look at humans in a judgmental way, you'll always be disappointed. And not only looking at others, but sometimes ourselves. We can be disappointing ourselves sometimes. And from my background, I came from a very dysfunctional background. I had a father who was an alcoholic, was very physically and verbally abusive, so I came from a background of just being a mess. So when I came to Christianity and got saved, and I've had to work hard at trying to develop my integrity and my character. And my integrity and character were terrible. I was like a Matthew, like a tax collector, a guy who would, betray other people, take advantage of other people. So I had to come out of that and continue, and I'm still working on my character and integrity to try to align it as much like what Christ wants me to be. So I appreciate that.
Well, one of the things that I teach you in the book, and this was so helpful for me, if I come to somebody and I said, so, John, what's your purpose? Well, the question is actually too big for most people. It's too massive. And so let's start paying attention. If you think about a puzzle, all the pieces come together to give you a perfect picture. Well, we can do the same thing with our purpose. So what I get people to do is to break down and start paying attention to little things in life. In other words, what are the kind of people you like to hang out with? Geographically, do you like to be in the coast? Do you like to be in the mountains? Do you like to be in the desert? You want to be in snow caps, in Aspen, or do you want to be in Hawaii on the beach? These are all clues on what and where God wants you to be. Because I believe, why would he create you with those interests, gifts, and talents if he didn't want you to use them? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. Right. In other words, that means that, I accidentally created you with a passion for music, but I don't want you to sing. So it just doesn't work biblically. So from there, I get you to also look at things, what kind of learning you like to do. When we think about what are experiences. So as a family, we've been very blessed is that we are an experiential family. So we've done bungee jumping. We've done zip lines. We have done jet skis. We've done go-karts. We've done auto racing. We have motorcycles. And so this is it's these experiences as a family. So I enjoy a life like that has these things in it. Now, there's other people that don't. Well, that's fine. I also knew at that time that I loved speaking. I mean, to be asked to be an MC at a wedding, it was an honor. I never said no. Like, it was just not, I don't want to do it. Yet we know a lot of people are watching this. Speaking in front of an audience is one of their greatest fears. Well, I've had zero. Some people say, Ken, do you have any nervousness when you speak? And I said, absolutely none, like zero. I have anticipation. I have not anxiousness, but this energy where I want to get going. Mm-hmm. And so those of us that speak, we understand what that is. Then we start getting into other elements about what are the things that you are good at. And all of those come together to represent who you are. Now, example, when I was growing up in grade 9, my English teacher said I would never amount to anything because I couldn't read or write. So when I went to school, computers were just coming in, and it wasn't really prevalent until I went to college. And we've discovered when I did my master's degree, my MBA, is that I was dyslexic, just minor. And, God's mostly healed that, but the reality is that spelling and all that just didn't happen. However, I started to, instead of handwriting, started typing. And I never thought, you remember in school, you used to have that typing course. Well, that was ridiculous. Now everything I do in terms of writing is on the keyboard. Well, now I'm an author of 4 million words of content.
Wow.
Several assessments, books, over 500 published articles. Are you kidding me? There's no way in my 20s you would have ever convinced me I was going to be an author. Speaker? Yeah. Author? Not. So sometimes they're hidden gems so I'm still contributing to helping other people to live their purpose, but now through the written word and through books and through the ability to put psychological tools and assessments that help people to help your values, to, know your leadership skills. And so I didn't know that was going to unfold there, but you don't have to. I mean, some of these things come as you move along. It's just really an expansion, of course, now in this world, you have online courses and videos and all the things that we're doing, such as now. I mean, who even thought about a video podcast even a decade or 20 years ago?
Right.
It's just standard. So now what I get people to do is to actually create an autobiography of all the things in life in these titles in these areas that were energizing for them. Not negative, not neutral. And then I have you go back and pay attention to the words and the situations and the constructs that were positive for you. And then from there, you construct what I call a keyword, one page with keywords that represent your life. So in the center of my keywords is God, and around that is love and speaking in people. And the other is travel and encouragement. So these are words that represent the core of who I am. So in the career development field, there's a thing called National Occupational Codes and Standard Industry Codes. And the reality is what I do doesn't fit into any of those. And I don't really believe in these sort of occupational, oh, you should be an accountant or whatever. No, I think that we're way more diverse than that. There's 40,000 job titles in North America already, and there's more growing every day. Whoever thought about fiber optic repair person 50 years ago? Didn't exist, right? Mm-hmm. So there's some jobs and roles and responsibilities we will do that aren't even invented yet. However, the essence of who I am, what am I doing? I am here to encourage others, to teach others. And then, of course, that moved into, and this is interesting, and I don't know, the Lord's just prompting me to say this now, is that I never thought I was worthy of teaching his word because of who I was, how broken I was, how inadequate I was. And he said, you know what, if it was you teaching, then that's true, but it's not. He said, I have redeemed you. The righteousness of Christ is in me. And so then I just started to feel that it was okay for me to start teaching the word. And it's interesting. I've had a successful podcast called Secrets of Success with Dr. Ken Keyes for over 5 years.
Wow.
300 guests, New York Times bestsellers on the show.
Wow. That's
And I
fantastic.
recently put it on pause. And the reason I put it on pause is the Lord's moving me towards, just as we're doing here, doing a podcast that's filled with the Spirit. In other words, a faith-based, video-based podcast. I think we're talking about it being a Kingdom Leadership Unleashed or something like that, where we are going to make sure that the Spirit's the center of the conversation. Because really at our age, John, and I'm not making us old because Moses was 80 before his first real job, is that we know that our life is a little bit shorter than it was at this point. We have a time where we have to influence. And without Jesus and God in the center of our lives, in the center of the people who are watching it, there is a void. And I want everybody to be there. And I feel called. I don't feel equipped all the time. And I don't always feel worthy because the enemy wants to mess with me. But this is the evolution of my purpose, where I've moved over these years. And I says, I probably wasn't ready for this 20 years ago. I wasn't mature enough. I wasn't grounded enough. I hadn't developed. All these years of writing and working with experts, and I've been blessed with many, many mentors over the years, and have been awesome. And then with that, once you've done all this journaling, and by the way, I had over 60 handwritten pages of going through this activity, then you start moving into, what do you really want this to look like? So if you had the perfect sort of scenario of how your relationships with your family would unfold, what does that look like? So what if you're thinking about your career, what would that look like? If you're thinking about physically, what would that look like? So we now get you to take the responsibility to do this. And then somebody came to me and said, because this is now a full e-course online, somebody says, well, this is going to take a bit of work, and it might even take me a couple of months to do it. And I said, great. So where are you going to be in 2 months if you don't do it? You're still going to be lost. And so this goes back to the comment that the two Richards said, is that, are you willing to do the work? Are you willing to invest? Are you willing to be prayerful? I mean, the Holy Spirit beyond this will guide you around these things. So what have you found with working with different people around you that, they're Christians, but just don't seem to be in the zone? They don't seem to be in purpose or on purpose.
Yeah, some of the issues I've had, which I've even mentioned some of them to Chris, is people seem to be in general not happy. I've given myself personally several tasks to Christians, or they've indicated the trouble that they're having or problem that's in their life. I've given them solutions, and they don't actually want to get out of that mess that they're in. and I've given them very good or very easy solutions that wouldn't take much to get out of it. And so I find that a lot of Christians are in a what do you call that? A crutch? What are they like?
A rut.
A rut. Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're in a rut, and they don't. Even when you tell them how to get out, they just don't seem to want to get out of it. It's like they're in this spiral, and they're just staying there.
Yeah, absolutely. There's an old saying that's been around for years. It's called some people prefer the certainty of misery versus the misery of uncertainty. So if you're going to step out of, you're going to be in this comfortable zone where we get into this comfort zone, and now you've made it about your life, not about serving him. I didn't say it was going to be easy, but it's interesting, when I've done all these presentations, it says, Ken, you've done 3,000 presentations around the world. Aren't you tired of it? So absolutely not.
Right.
Because when you're in that zone, when you're doing what you're called to do, as I said in the beginning of the show, you are energized by it. Now, there's some days if I'm traveling. I remember we had a contract with a large Fortune 50 company, and I was on the road 300 days a year for 7 years. And I was doing over 200 presentations a year somewhere across the country. I lived in an airplane. 1 year, I had 150 flights in 1 year. Wow. And so, however, my experience, just accelerated, tenfold in that short period of time. It was a blessing. It set up us fiscally, for just about the rest of our lives as far as the work that we were doing. And so my encouragement is, if you don't know what your purpose is, then your purpose is to find your purpose.
Right.
And that there are steps you can take. And now we do have this book we're going to give as a free gift for you in the e-version of it. So go to Ken Keys, KenKeis.com/kingdom. And I'm going to give you a free copy of the ebook of The Quest for Purpose for you to be able to embrace it. Now, if you don't do this, then it's your fault, not ours.
Right.
We're offering it to you. Now, I'm amazed, John, when I do this offer, how many people don't take advantage of it when it's right there. It goes to speak to character. Are you willing to do the work? Are you willing to step up? And the other thing is, if you know somebody that you care about that is struggling, then make it a gift for them. And of course, you can buy the soft cover through the sites or something that are available there. But again, just start moving towards it. Now, don't burden yourself. If you don't know what your purpose is, then allow yourself the space, the freedom, the grace, if you may, to go on this journey for the clarity. And if it takes you a year, who cares? You're going to be way further ahead than just staying frustrated for the next year.
Yeah, and I find that's a frustrating thing for me in the sense that, when you see somebody and they're in a situation that they're talking to you, that they want to get beyond, they want to get out of it, they want to change, and you give them personal solutions, which aren't too hard to do. The key is then to take the first step. They don't even seem to oftentimes want to take that first step. It's too bad, because the people that become successful are the people that are willing to take that first step, whatever that is. And we even had an apostle, T. Wayne Bishop, that taught this fantastic message about knowing the seasons of your life. And, in the same way that there's 4 seasons here in Canada, that we have spring, summer, fall, and winter, there's different seasons that God will have for your life. And he can have you in a season of doing a certain thing, and then the grace of God is going to shift from that season into a new season, and that grace comes to an end. And it's important to know that grace is finished so that you can move into this next season. But a lot of times people want to keep trying to keep in that season to their
Exactly.
detriment. I mean, it's important to walk with God and know those seasons, and we'll talk more about that in the next show. So thank you for joining us today. My name is John Ramos. I'm the lead pastor of Kingdom Culture Ministries here in British Columbia, Canada. Dr. Ken Keis shared his website. You can go on the website to get the free ebook. If you have any questions or comments or need some help, he'll be more than happy to help you.
Absolutely.
You can go to our website at www.kccm.ca if you have any questions or comments, or if God has put on your heart to sow a seed. We look for people's support to not only keep this ministry going, but growing. And so your support with prayer, with helping us when we come to your region to doing events, and financially is what keeps this ministry going. So go to our website. You can give through credit card, through check, through PayPal. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to the next session with Dr. Ken Keis that's going to be coming up next week. God bless you, and have a good day.